So, a couple things here. As I mentioned earlier, we have a small group, and we have a lot of speakers. And I've been chastised several times for having too many speakers. And I told them, they said, you have too many people. But I said, you can't have too many good people. All right, so we're going to get started. Dina Bagley is our first speaker. She's going to talk about the history of women in beekeeping. Come on up, Nina. Come on. All right. So anyway, we're going to keep this rolling, keep this moving, and they've been in Bee Culture magazine. Some of Nina's articles.
I've been keeping bees about 20 years. I'm an Ohio queen bee. I started with Dana Stallman, raising queens for 8 years. And then I got into Joe Lackshaw's instrumental insemination class. Found out that's really not my cup of tea. I'm not going to be a scientist. Then I took my master's with Dr. Bromenschenk in Montana. So basically, in my area in Columbus, I'm an urban beekeeper in German Village. I started with 2 hives. I turned into 50. Sometimes I do more. I had $10,000 donated to the Children's Hospital in my name for helping the bees in Greenlawn Cemetery, where Sue, I think, used to have bees there, didn't you, years ago? I found your spot, and you were my first lady that got me into researching these women. But then I found the older women before you. So I have to get them, and then I'll come to you next. So I run 10 hives in Greenlawn Cemetery to pollinate, and I run 45 hives behind the wood line. I take care of the State House bees. I take care of the Metro Park bees. I take care of the State Park bees. I educate. I was the first one to get a pilot in Ohio with Mayor Coleman to put in the local park in my area. So I am a beekeeper, but mentor had left me a bunch of bee books from the 1800s, starting from 1861. I'm a history buff. My past life was a head pattern maker in the garment industry. I'm a fashion designer. And when I came here, there was no fashion, so I got into bees, and I thought I'd master that. But you'll never master it. I'll never learn everything. So my first woman is Mrs. Tupper that I'm going to start with. I found her through Mrs. Harrison. Now, Mrs. Tupper I wrote about, but I'll just go quick through her. She was arrested for forgery, sent to jail, but she was a big important part of beekeeping. There you go. Okay, so the pioneer women beekeepers, we know they had a hard life, and they had a lot of grit. So Mrs. Tupper, she was born in 1822, and she married an Allen Tupper. 1843. She married an Allen Tupper, and her family was from the Wheaton family. She was wealthy. So Brown University is where her family went, and all of her uncles. So you'll see Brown and Wheaton. So just to set the stage for her politically, she was connected. Her dad was Noah Smith. He worked with Abraham Lincoln and Hannibal Hamlin. So she encouraged women from the temperance movement. She brought them in. She was arrested in 1877 for forging and passing bank notes. And I think she got in trouble because her husband went to the Civil War, and his health failed, and he couldn't keep up with things. And you'll see as we go through. She spoke French and German. She was very intelligent. She was a self-taught scientist and a continental entomologist, they said, because she couldn't go to school. Colleges wouldn't accept women back then. So she did teach at the Iowa State University there. So, we had the temperance movement and everything going on, so she moves out to Iowa in 1850 because her health was bad. She didn't think she'd live. She had cholera and all of that going on, and floods, and she was having kids, and she was losing them. So she got into bees around 1857 before the Civil War. Her husband's health started failing. His business was in trouble. His wealth melted away like the dew before the sun. That's what she said. And I think she found out she didn't marry well, probably. She had a really nice life before, and things weren't going real well. Okay, so then he goes off to the Civil War. He was 57 when he came back from the Civil War. So he wasn't in good health. So that just shows you They came in 1860 to Iowa. Her father worked with them. Now, she was big on Johann. I had to practice this name over and over and over. If I say it wrong, Johann Zerzan. 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 Thank you. I need your accent. I've been working on this one. I'm dyslexic. I'm calling him Zerzan, but that wasn't working. Okay. So he believed in the parthenogenesis thing, and she felt she didn't have any hybrids. She had all pure queens, and she did it in confinement, wouldn't tell anyone. Okay, so there was a lot of skepticism about it, that either she was deceiving herself or deceiving other people, but because she spoke French and German, she could go to Germany and teach the women. So he was her friend. Then, Adam Grimm, the late Adam Grimm, he raised queens and went to Italy as well. He didn't believe what she was doing, so one day when she wasn't home, he came to her bee yard, check out her bees, and found that her Italian queen looked just like his Italian. So there was a lot of skepticism about that. So this is where it gets interesting. She finds this lady, Mrs. Savory. She was a philanthropist, but I think she met her when she came out in the 50s, and that's where she got her land grant for her homes. So the Savory had the money. She gave her $10,000, and Tupper had the bee knowledge. So they're going to go into business, the Iowa Italian Bee Company, in 1871. This was her house. Savory was, they called her a handsome woman, where Mrs. Tupper was plain. I think Mrs. Tupper was plain because she started foraging. She wanted to bring notice to herself, and sometimes that happens. But this is where trouble, I think, started. They wanted to do queens. So she goes up to visit Dadon to see if she liked his stock. And she wanted to buy 20 to 15 stock from him. But then when she got there, she realized she wanted more. He had black bees. He loved the black bees, and so did she. So she decides to send him to Italy for 100 queens. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do it or not. So after she left, he wrote her a letter and said, yes, I'll go to Italy. I will bring your Italian queens back if you pay for shipping and pay for the advertising. Okay? So he leaves in 1873 on the La Ville de Paris to set out for France. Okay? He was so happy, France to Italy. So he was so happy to be in France because that's where he came from. And it was funny, there was a little article. He apparently didn't like the way the American women dressed or how they wore their hair, because when he got to France, there's another word I had to practice, the chignon. It was a bun. He liked the women's hair tight behind their hair with a little bun. American women wore the buns on top of their head, all over their heads, everywhere. And their clothes were heavy. So just gave me an insight on his personality. So they bring the queens back, and half of them are all dead. They arrived dead. So they decided that if you ordered 6 queens, you got 1. If you ordered 35, we're going to give you 6, just to make it right for everybody. And unfortunately, business went out. It failed. Okay? So this is when she starts getting arrested a couple of years later. Things are catching up with her. She's been passing banknotes, bad banknotes, and forging all along. And I think because her husband wasn't doing well, she had to survive, take care of the family. She had 11 kids. Yeah. And she had a couple that she lost, but there was 11 that was alive. So in 1876, she gets arrested. And they say that she moved there 20 years with $2,000. She had a good reputation. But her husband, they started a business, it failed. Then they got to an extensive bee business, and it went under. And because her husband couldn't hold a job, it took up the burden for her to take care of the family. So she had to take care of the family. But I found this in the paper, and she lived in Des Moines, Iowa. So I found this in Iowa that when they arrested her, there was a note that she gave to her daughter. And it basically was, enclosed you will find the notes and circumstances under which I obtained them. I must keep secret, even from you. I promise not to use them unless driven to it by dire necessity. And I desire you to do the same thing. Okay? Jesus X Christ was the mark. 30 days after date, I promise to pay Miss Ellen S. Tupper, a bearer of the sum of $1,000 with interest, 10%, her Anya. So actually, she might have been crazy. She might not have been. She might have been crazy like a fox. She knew that if she was crazy, they couldn't arrest her. She couldn't go to jail. They say she kind of winked at her husband in court as she walked away, but I wasn't there. I'm just going by paper notes that I find in the newspapers. So I wrote about her, and it's pretty extensive, and it was in one of the bee culture um, sections. So this is just what I thought she might have looked like when they took her away in the paddy wagon. Well, I had to find like a crazy paddy wagon picture. Okay, so the good thing about it, she was onto something on this confinement of getting her queens mated. She felt that if a queen was purely mated, her royal daughters were going to look exactly like her. She stuck to that. So she was kind of onto something. She hung out with Huber, Wagner. So she had a group of friends she was hanging out with. But she did leave us two daughters that were ministers. Her son was Alan True Tupper. He is an artist, Western artist. I just wanted everybody to know who she was. Unfortunately, the sad thing is, you could do 100 good things in life. It's the one thing you do that they remember you by. That's what happened in her case. So, Miss Ellen Tupper, an entomologist of continental reputation, died in El Paso, Texas, Monday. That's all they said about her. You know, and they could have said a lot of nicer things about her. I got into the history because my mentor left me a bunch of books starting at 1861. I just started buying them. I have an extensive library in my house. E-books. I have the original 1877 ABC Culture, and I have the 1891. I spend my winters reading this with my friend Linda Miller. She's a beekeeper. With her, we're like genealogists, researchers, we're sleuths when it comes to those women, friends. So, I got into it because of Miss Harrison. Miss Harrison, she was pretty neat. She was born in 1831. She was born in Coshocton, Ohio, and then they moved to Peoria, Illinois. She was educated. Her dad was a doctor, but school was limited, but they taught her what they could teach her that any private school would give you. She married a Robert Dodds, unfortunately, in 1855, but he died 2 years later. She was a widow. So she went back to teaching, and then she married a Lobel Harrison, and she purchased, his dad was a doctor as well. He was substantial gentleman in that area. They lived on three city lots in the city, and she purchased her first hive in 1871 without his permission because she knew if she told him she wouldn't be able to have them, and she'd hear the curtain lectures for the next year. So she was so excited because she found on the Prairie Farmer an article from Mrs. Tupper and her flowery essay on bees. So she couldn't wait to get into the bees in the spring. So she purchased 2 hives from the late Adams Grimm, and they were Italians. She loves her Italian bees, and she started writing for Gleanings after Tupper went to jail. So I think that's how she stepped in and got into the picture. So she's known for all of her writings, and she would write like how to light a smoker. She was big on the juvenile, on the kids and what to do. And she's all kinds of articles. Women, what to wear in the bee yard. And she was a very blunt woman. She was very candid. She'd tell you exactly what she wanted to say, and she'd take A.I. Root to task. And she had no problem telling him where to go, and he would come back with it. So, yeah. So this is like what she would do after Ellen took off. She would just write in there. But I liked her because, show you, this is where I found her, in my 1891, my 1899. She did a bee veil. You look under that ABC, there's veils, all kinds of veils. So there's men on one side and women on the other side. So it's pretty cool because being a fashion background, I was like, that dress is pretty neat. So I made up a dummy dress to show everybody what it looked like. She did it in cotton. She didn't like wool. And the underneath piece, she would wear her undergarments. She used to have them in a whole piece. And she decided that wasn't, didn't work out. I wanted to buy it, didn't work out. So then she cut them in half and put little buttons there. Okay? So she'd have that underneath, and then she'd have a strap under the bottom of them. And then she would put stockings on. Okay? Talk about being hot, right? And she must have had congestive heart failure. She retained water. So she would put slippers on, or maybe leather shoes, but she would put a lot of clothes on to sweat the water out. She would go work the bees, and she felt much better. She would even go to these electrical places and get shocks, to help her out, which was really weird. But yeah, she did this garment, and underneath she had her drawers, she had the apron, and her little dress was a sack dress. That's all it was. Just a sack dress she put on. And then her veil that she put on was green wire cloth with pasteboard on the top. So must have been heavy. Must have been really awful. So her veil didn't go over very well. So this was really good because years and years ago I found this article that Moses Quimby wrote about 1879, what women should be wearing in the bee yard. And then in 1882 and 83 is when Harrison came out with hers. But I found this really funny. Women were becoming increasingly interested in beekeeping. So he believed, okay, clinging skirts were quite out of place. The apiary, and that every woman who wishes to work among the bees should wear a dress suitably short, drawers, made of the same fabric. Which really, I'm like, where did this guy come from? Okay? Tolerably wide at the bottom. And then a little strap at the bottom. So, I'm trying to visualize this. I'm going to look like a clown if I go out to the apiary. So how short did he want it? So I thought that was strange. And then I saw something that Michael Palmer wrote years ago, and I couldn't find it. I think they might have taken it off the internet. It was Victorian humor. Something that AI Root might have wrote or something. And it was basically, if women have bees up their dress, they should just run outside, lay upside down, put their legs up in the air, and the bees will go where the bees don't want to be. So I thought, that is just wrong. so I went back looking for it, and they must have taken it off the internet. But somewhere in one of my books, I'm going to come across what AI Root wrote. So, yeah. So this was Mrs. Harrison. She must have been a woman of means, okay? She believed a dirty beekeeper should have a dirty hive. And I never understood why. I always liked that because it's true, I think, And I found out why she believed that. She was a neat freak. Look at her honey house. She was so neat. She would make a dress and come in the evening and hang it up, put it away, and then change it to her other clothes. All right? And then the children, the juveniles, she would tell them in the springtime, which I thought was bizarre. Take your bees out of your box, put them in another box, scrub that box really well. Then take your bees and put them back in the box. So I think that's why she said a dirty beekeeper should have a dirty hive. She was really a stickler. These were her drawings, okay? It was pretty neat. She liked doing these drawings. She was very religious. All these women were God-fearing women. Very, very religious. She would sit at times in her little chair and she would write her stories. And when she wasn't feeling well, she didn't feel well a lot of times. She ran 100 hives until she got ill. And then it went down to 30. But she did sell a lot of honey. So this is what I found. I did an article on this one too. It's pretty interesting. I found this picture, and it haunted me for about 4 years. Like, who are these people? Well, I knew I had the book. I knew that was Frank Benton, and I knew that was the little Wonder Bingham smoker. So I couldn't figure out who everybody was until I found an article. Good thing about Mrs. Harrison, she was well-traveled. She did have means. So she went to Syria, and she wrote a story on what was going on there, which is really cool. So she was more worried about the peasant daughter and how well she was treated by the men, because we were all about the women, okay, which I thought was kind of cool. The controllable beehive there that Benton has, just had come out, and they all spoke 8 different languages. So she was like talking about that. I'm trying to identify these people in this picture. I think I have a lot of them down. I think one is Cook. I think one's C.C. Miller and a Philip Sperlinger or something. So that's another day. Linda and I are going to find out who these gentlemen are. But she did go to Syria. And then I found an article that Frank Benton wrote. But he gave it more in a scientific view of what was going on, which was really nice. So she also went to New York. And as she was walking through Central Park, she found a purple flower. She went to the botanist and asked what it was. It was chicory. She had never seen chicory. So she was interesting. And she was faithful until death. She died at 70. And that's Lucinda Harrison. Which brings us into her friend Sarah. Okay? Sarah Axel, she was pretty cool. She was lame. She was an invalid. And she married her husband, and they started the congregational churches in Roseville, Illinois. She, her other side of the family was a convict, so they had a lot of property, and they sold a lot of honey. And she was ill. They were incredibly blessed and devoted their income missions both to foreign and domestic. So whatever honey she brought in, she would send it off and donate. She purchased her first colony in 1871, and I thought this was neat. As those increased, her health increased, and with that, they grew, and with an increase, interest came, increase in health. So she was much better off outside. She would work 100 hives in the hot sun than to stay inside underneath the stove. She didn't want to be in there. She believed that women should be outside in the fresh air. And 182 hives, she pulled off 39,000 pounds of honey. And yeah, her and her husband worked together as a team. She had no children. Harrison didn't have any children, but Harrison took in orphans. She had hired women help her. Yeah, she had a lot of honey. A.I. Root said that she wasn't a polite writer, but she was practical and interesting. I'll take that compliment if I was her. Yeah. So this is why. This is the old farmer. She believed that you should have a book. Everybody should read a book over and over and over and over. And you should go without a third meal, your whole family, just to buy that book, okay? So that you can get educated. And this one really got her. The queen is a king. I have seen it, so it is so. The farmer kept saying it was a king. And she's like, no, it's a queen, okay? But he wouldn't believe her. And she would say, why? Because I have seen it, and it is so. And the royal jelly on the back of the legs, I have seen it, it is so. She kept trying to tell him it's not, it's pollen, this and that. She'd argue with him. But that old farmer and today, it's the same thing, you know? So, sorry guys, it's the same thing. I have seen it, it is so, and I'm sticking to my guns, okay? So, this was what's cool about these two women. They're the only two women in the 1899 ABC, okay? Bee Culture biography amongst all the men. There's so many men, and they're the only two women. So A.I. Root must have liked these two. And yeah, she's next to Langstroth, Quinby, Doolittle. It goes on. And this is what it looks like. And when I opened the page, this is what I saw. And I get excited, and I get nuts chasing down all this research. But that was Mrs. Holmes at the top. She had the best hat, okay? Her veil was practically the best because it went around and went under the arms. We're kind of still using that principle today, all right? Mrs. Axel's down here at the bottom, right here. This is why she wasn't practical. I mean, wasn't polite, excuse me. I'm very sorry that my bee bonnet has given so much trouble. I had no thought of anything but a hint that might be a help to some middle-aged lady who might, like myself, find a hat of bird to wear. I had no thought that our brother and sister beekeepers were so inconsiderate that they would rush out for one, even if it suited them or not. The top part here was not supposed to go down flat. It was supposed to go out and over to protect her from the sun. So she was a little upset that everybody went out and bought it. It didn't work. So I don't think I would be wearing that one. I like Mrs. Holmes is much better. So yes, they moved out to Iowa in around 1920 to do what was so dear to her heart, the missions. She died. I think she was 84. Yes. So she, for being an invalid, she lived a long life, and probably beekeeping kept her healthy. So this one is going to be real quick. I'm still getting in the process of her, but I had to tap into her because all the women talk about it. Like all of us friends, all my friends out there, we would talk about this and that person. So Julian Tennell, she was the biggest queen person in Louisiana and the biggest bee lady in Louisiana. And she died from erysipelas, a bacterial facial disease, which is really sad. She was only 53 years old. Her husband was 20 years older than her. She had 2 kids, but she ran a big bee apiary. In the antebellum days, she was like an ornament. She was in the social life. So this was just telling about her death and who she left behind and how well she was in the bee business and what she did. And this was her remnant plantation. So, and the reason why I mentioned her is because Mrs. Chaddock. Mrs. Chaddock was jealous of all of her friends. Friends, their mortgages were all paid for, but hers wasn't. Okay? She was born in Indiana in 1844. Her mother was a Quaker, and when she was young, her mom died. Her dad couldn't afford the kids, so she was pawned off to go live with a neighbor. So she had a really tough life. So she would talk about her friends like Julian Tennell, how she has help, how Harrison has help, how Mrs. Axel has help, but I have no help. Okay? So she would complain a lot. She married John C. Chaddock. He was in the war. He was a sharpshooter. Okay, a very nice man, from what Mrs. Harrison says. He was a very kind man. They had 3 kids, and they lived in the same area in Pavia, Indiana, for when she married. All Quakers. So she got her first swarm, black bees, on a peach tree in 1874. And that's when she started her bee culture. And she wrote a lot in Gleanings on what we should be doing, like what. Okay, for example, she went out to get bees and she couldn't find help, so she took the box of bees off and she would roll it to her kitchen. If you call rolling a square, she said, to my kitchen, she'd roll it straight to the kitchen, open the screen door, shake all the bees off in the kitchen. They would all go to the door. She'd take care of her honey, and then she'd open it up, the screen door, and let them go back where they came. She would complain that the farmers would go by and nobody would help. Well, she was a peculiar woman. Mrs. Harrison said she was peculiar for her time. And then A.I. Root, she would upset people by the way she would write. For example, she would say, 14 years ago, this woman stands where I stood. So this is why I write about these ignorant people. So, so he's like, you can't do that to people. But then Harrison would write in and say, she's really a nice, kind person. And A.I. Root would say, well, if she's your friend, then I guess she's okay, but she is peculiar. And that's what they titled her as. Okay? So she goes up to Dansville, New York, to take her sister to this sanitarium. Anyway, she meets the acquaintance of Clara Barton, all right, in Philadelphia. So she meets her, and she decides she wants to work with her. So she goes, 8 years later, she comes back to her. And she goes down the Mississippi, and she helps with the floods on the Maddie Bell, and she became friends with her. She was a humanitarian, so she becomes this humanitarian. And she says, by energy and varied abilities, it's a fair type of American country woman, a class peculiar to this land, and scarcely possible in any other. So, yeah, they're nice. But let's see. So yeah, Mahalia was one of I called this guy up in Canada, and I found him. I go through the historical places, libraries, and I'll call people, and I found this gentleman in Canada that knew her and didn't know her, but said it was my grandfather's brother's wife, and that she basically was what I thought she was. a beekeeper, poet, and a humanitarian. So she was kind of neat. She let's see, she had 3 kids, and that's about it. There's a lot of good stories about her. She kind of upset me. And then it brings us into Elizabeth Cotton. She's scandalous. Poor woman. She got a bad rap. Okay, she was born in 1844. She was 17, and her husband was 25 when she married Charles. He had 9 kids. She was pregnant from the day she got married till like the mid 1800s. Okay, lots of things were written about it, bad things. All right. She was called Lizzie Cotton again is advertising bee knowledge in some of the agriculture papers. She's a fraud. She's a fraud of the male gender, and a newspaper of any kind. She's stupid for putting her stuff in, and everybody should shun her. So I don't know if it was the old man that put her up to doing all this, because I did research on him, and when I found out that his uncle was insane and was going around the town calling the preacher a liar, I think he might have inherited some of his insanity, because we found him when he died. He was insane, basically, is what the Historical Society told me. So she got charged with honey adulteration. She felt that you should feed your bees all the way up to the clover blooms. And if a little bit of the sugar gets into the clover, it's okay. It doesn't matter. But she was on to something. She was getting the yield of her bees up, getting them strong and making bees. Which it took me a while to figure it out. But that's what her plan was. But she kind of deceived people, and AI Root would say you're basically telling people, something that's not true. You shouldn't be telling them to put, sugar water in and then selling it as honey. It's not right. So he didn't agree with her. So there's lots of stuff in the papers about her. Okay? All kinds of women calling in. I got a nucleus with 5 bees, frames of bees, maybe 2 bees in it, or my queen didn't make it, or I sent her $4 and I didn't get anything. Even AI Root sent money to her for a book. He never got it. And he was on her side for a while until he realized he got scammed by her. And then he started writing things about it. And it just kind of snowballed. So another one, lady wrote. She's like, Mrs. C's famous book on bee culture with her photograph inserted on the first flyleaf. What a boon. AI Root even said she wasn't very attractive. Wrote it in a nice way. And I just felt really bad for this woman. And yeah, she got a bad rap. Yeah. And she stole her controllable hive from Huber and Doolittle, and he called her out on that. So I don't know. I think maybe her husband might have been behind this. And because she would write so feminine-like when to send in the advertisement, but when it came time to get the bills, the money, it was in a masculine handwriting. So something was going on. But you should know about her. You can go on the main library online. I found her book for free, and you can read it. And it was 125 pages. And after I read it, I'm like, she is arrogant. There's something that didn't sit right with me. It didn't sound like a woman writing a book. And this is what her home looked like. So she didn't look poor to me. And they did have beehives. So she's in a boarding place in 1910. She spent the last 20 years of her house running a boarding place with her kids. And her husband died in asylum. He had senility. So that was confirmed by the Historical Society. So I do believe there must have been something that trickled down in the family. And there she is. I think she had Bright's disease, because Mrs. Chaddock said, American women not as strong as European. They have just a heart failure, consumption, and Bright disease. So I have a feeling her eyes looked funny and stuff. She died from that. It probably was Bright disease. The sad thing about Mrs. Chaddock telling everybody that we're not as strong, she was the one that died at 46 years old. These women all live longer. So, yeah. So then it brings me into Lademia. I just found Lademia not too long ago. We had to throw away. She is from Ohio, and she's pretty mysterious. She her mother died when she was young, like most of them, and they had to go live with relatives. Um, she moved to Michigan, and she was 22 when she got married, and her husband was 60. And something was wrong there. So I went and found. I mean, I might find a 60-year-old that looks really good at 22 and might say, okay, but you just, yeah, so I spoke to a distant relative, and they said that she had lived in the house. She was a housekeeper and a domestic servant. So she said a lot of times when the wife would die, they would take over the place and marry the husband. And I'm like, okay. So she was doing a background check on her, so I could help this lady out by giving her the bee stuff that she didn't know about. In the census, I found her working as a servant. But then from 1870 to like 1880s, I couldn't really find anything on her. And then I found that in 1886 is probably when she came back to Ohio, because she was writing in the progressive beekeeping journals from 86 to 88. And it was out of Cuyahoga. And so there was a bee thing going on there. So then she comes back to live with her cousin, Hattie. She was a Bennett, Joseph. And they lived in this 125-year-old house. Joseph raised bees. He had an apiary, no livestock, just raised bees. She came back, and she was doing all the queen grafting and everything for him. So she was big in Ohio State Beekeepers Association. She helped with the Constitution. She helped. She did all the minutes. She was the secretary, the treasurer. So anywhere they would go, Chicago, Washington Courthouse, Columbus, she would describe what was going on in the meeting. C.C. Miller was there. They'd get up and they'd sing a song during a break. That's what they did. So I put her in because of she was Ohio. So yeah, she did Queens, and she was also a successful honey producer. But she was big, right, in Gleanings and ABJ on what was happening with the Ohio State Beekeepers Association. And she died at age 56. Now, this one really caught my attention. I wish I would have found this one years ago, but I found it like about 4 years ago, and I struggled. I knew Harrison, I knew Mrs. Axel, I knew Wilson, but I didn't know Sherman, I didn't know Heber. So I couldn't find much on them. Then I found, one day going through my gleanings, there's big stories on both of them. So Mrs. Sherman is in the middle. These were the 5 prominent beekeeping women. Mrs. Sherman was part of the Texas Dianas. They called them in Texas. I heard about that years ago. The mythological, whatever, huntress, the queen, Diana, she was the hunter. So that's why they named her. So there's not a lot on her. I couldn't find much about her because she didn't write that much, but she did do some writing. She was married at 65. She had a son at 66. She was a widow at 68. Okay? And she was a school teacher. I just like the fact she had a crown on her head. That, she made it special. But she lived in Salado Bell, Texas. And she ran this farm all by herself without a husband on it. So she was the only one that was a widow. So that's hard. So she did all this honey. Her house, you could walk around it. You could see the hives everywhere. She ran 100 hives. She had a little spot built on her house, another little room with a window that she could put the chicken feed in the wintertime and not go outside. So she opened up to feed her chickens. So she ran a lot of chickens and a lot of honey. Then I found this in the paper. I thought this was kind of cool. It gave me a little bit more insight on her. She was selling in 1894 to go live with her son, who was a doctor in Dallas. So she was selling everything. Chickens, the puggies, everything. So for $2,000, you could buy it all. She had Italian honeybees, hybrids, honey houses, chicken houses, extractors, bedroom set, everything. I think she just took her clothes and left. So she was pretty interesting, and I'm sure I'll find with Linda and I, we've got a long winter ahead of us. We'll find more stuff on. But she was the largest lady in the South, Texas. So, then this was an interesting one. Mrs. Wilson. She was the one in that picture I showed you that did the apron. She was C.C. Miller's right-hand lady, which was really cool. His first wife died. He married Sydney. Then when he married Sydney, she came along with him. So Emma was his bee everything, and she would do all of his work for him. She made a bee veil she was very proud of, and she also made that dress. It's a Butterick pattern, $36.97, and you could buy that pattern and you could make it. And I've been looking for that pattern, so which I thought was very cool. Yeah, then I would go visit. She'd show off her veil, and they'd visit on Sunday, and they'd have biggest spread. C.C. Miller, he said, the biggest farm food you ever saw, and they would go to church 3 times a day. So that was her dress, and these were the veils that were along. That thing looked really heavy. A lot of the women said they wouldn't want to wear it because they'd get too hot. And Miss Harrison said it wouldn't protect. So that's where I found that. And then it brings me to Anna E. Case. She's only listed as J.N. Heater, but she's one of the 5 prominent women. Couldn't find much on her, but I did find that they had this big article. And she grew up in Ohio, Defiance, Ohio. Then they moved to Niles, Michigan, and went to South Bend, Indiana. Dad raised bees. She was a school teacher. She wasn't well, and she goes to Nebraska. Her family moved out to Nebraska, so she decides to join them, and that's when she got married in 1877. And she found that this is boring, this isn't working, because her husband was a traveling salesman. Most of them were farmers. He was never home. So that's when she decided to do bees to keep herself busy. But the sad thing is, she died in Kansas at the age of 40. So she didn't live long either. But she had one of the biggest bee businesses. Yeah, I'll find more on her too as I go. Yeah, just says how she died. Found that. And then it brings me into Anna Botsford Comstock, which I really like. I think we all know who she is. She is incredible. I like her because she draws. I draw. I had something in common with her. She was a Quaker. Most of the women, their mothers were Quakers, which taught them how to be naturalists, which I thought was kind of neat. And she marries. She's the first one that can go to college. Okay, and that's what I liked about it. She could go to college. She attended the Chamberlain Institute in upstate New York. If you guys have never been to upstate New York, it's just gorgeous. I can see why the floral, the waters, and everything make it a great beach. So then she goes off to Cornell. She meets her husband in a zoology class in 1874, and that's how she gets involved. And they get married, and for the next 50 years, they kind of develop that bee program at Cornell. And her drawings, she did all of his drawings, 600 of them for his books. And then I think it's 1894, she decided not to be his helpmate anymore and to do her own stuff. So this was interesting. She was a wood engraver, one of the best ones out there. Okay, she got a lot of awards. And she was initiated in the Sigma 6, the National Honor Society, for women. But she was definitely up there. She had a brain. And that was one of her drawings. These were her drawings. She was incredible when it came to drawing. So this is she decides not to be the helpmate. She goes off on her own. So in 1897, she was named assistant at the Nature Study at Cornell University. She became the first assistant professor in 1899. But in 1900, that darn conservative board decided a woman shouldn't be on it and took her off. Okay? And Then she comes back in, and her title is lecturer in 1900, but then she prevailed in 1922. She becomes a professor. So she finally starting to see us grow, progress. She liked teaching outside. That was her big thing. She was on the Gleanings in 1906. When I came across that, I was like, score. It's weird when you research and you have all these books and you find an article, you get all excited. Your husband's like, why does that fascinate you? It just does. And I'm like, why do you care? Well, I said to my husband, well, it just fascinates me that you're fascinating. And I'm like, okay, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I like ghost friends. And then with COVID, Linda and I, everybody else was depressed. We were happy. We had all these ghost friends we were searching. So it's like we see dead people. Okay, so she writes all these books. Okay, and Insect Life, How to Know the Butterflies, Ways of the Six-Footed, How to Keep Bees, The Pet Book, and A Tree of Leisure. So she was pretty accomplished on her own. And there she passes away. After she passed away before her husband, then her husband passed away. He had a stroke. But they did develop that whole program, and it was awesome. And she's another one we could talk for hours and hours and hours on. Then it'll bring me into my last one here, Amanda. I had to throw her in. Were working on her, Linda and I, but then came an article in Bee Culture. Someone wrote about her, so we put her on the shelf because we didn't want to double dip. But then we thought, let's take it to another direction. We like going in and finding what their families were like, people who knew them. We want to bring them to life, okay, instead of just what's out there. So this woman had 18 kids, okay? Yeah. A lot of them didn't live, but she had a lot of kids. So she was the biggest in the world, they said, queen producer. She'd get $100 for a queen bag. She gets more for a queen than I would get for my queen. So, yeah, she was pretty good. I think she wrote in the Sunny South. She wrote for Glennings a lot and for American Bee Journal. And that's what her title was. This is kind of what stuff looked like. But this was her family. When we found this picture, it was pretty cool. Because up here on the left, you have her son William holding all the queens that he did. And then next to him is his brother Charles. And then little Leah down there holding the little Bingham Wonder smoker. And this little girl did queens and would go out and do queens. Her mom wrote the story, so I think her mom bragged on her a lot and said out of 50, she'd get 48. So she was a proud mom. Her husband, he couldn't read or write, and he wasn't physically able to do much. She had a typewriter, and she's holding the ABJ Bee Culture, and that was her Bible. He had a daughter up to the far left up there that was a year old when they got married, and she named her son Thomas York after the bee editor, and I think she had kids just to keep her bee business going. Yeah, because she was pregnant 18 times, and 1874 to 1902 she was pregnant. So, and they had a lot of bad things happen. She had foul brood really bad, and she had to burn everything. In 1908, she had a really bad fire. Not a fire. The heat came in. It was 115 degrees out. All of her nukes actually melted. Just melted away. So she had 100 queens left in bees that she could recoup and, start all over. But then there was a time when she, I think it was like 1910, that she started moving out to Utah. So they had a whole nother life out there in the California groves, and that's what Linda has been working on. So we're trying to find out what happened out there. She's been talking to this 80-year-old lady in Upland, California that kind of lived in that area. So that's kind of how we got our research, by going around and just digging. So it was sad. But for a guy that couldn't physically work, do anything, he sure the heck could. You had 18 kids, something was working. I'm thinking there's just something wrong there. You know, you can't go do that, but you can go do that. I'm thinking, no, you do your bee work first, and then we'll talk. You know, so that one got me. Remember that, husband? You do the bee work first. So that was what her family looked like. She had more children, and she had her Jeannie bee in the middle there was handicapped. So I think she took time out to take care of her. So basically, she's the end of my women, but I just wanted to show you. Oh, there she is. After she died in 1927, she died in June. I can't believe it. In October, guess what? I'm Mary Alice Wise. Look at her look on her face. Oh, here we go again. Whoa! I told my husband, no. That ain't happening. Yeah, and she's got a funny look on her face. I didn't know he could cook. Okay, so, yeah, I just put these in because this is called a good catch. We've all seen this picture, haven't we? You know what? I'll tell you what the picture means, which is really cool. This was first place, okay? A.I. Root gave a contest for photographers to take pictures of the women in the swarms. So this is called the good catch. This one was first place, this lady. This one was second. And he said to all you gentlemen out there that are not bald red, there's plenty of you out there. He said, if you want to meet these women, just write into the photographer. He'll let you know if they're available. So we had Match.com way back before we have it now. so yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. So there you go. Ohio Queen Bee, Nina Bagley, Columbus, Ohio. And one day, my next ones that we're doing starts with Eva Crane. You're on our list, Sue. So we got a lot of women to go through. So it's going to be cool. Yeah. Yeah. We just got to do birthdays. Just we're born later, which is a good thing. So yeah. So every day is a bee day, and I hope you enjoyed it. And let's just start this weekend. I just wanted to tell you real quick. I missed one thing. Okay. This one really got me. I want to go back to Mrs. Harrison. She was a woman of means. Okay. And Miss Axel said she was. She did. She always talked about her carriage and how she would go 60 miles to visit a friend in Chatham. So I'm a visual person. And I'm thinking, she's got one of the wooden carriages. You know, I'm a city girl. I don't know. She's riding in it's got to be awful. But then one of her friends wrote a story and said, it was raining out. And Miss Harrison had her face. She put the hood up on it, covering. So she had the Mercedes-Benz and the buggy back. This thing was fast and could travel. So if a horse went 8 miles per hour, it took her 7 hours to get there, but she still had the fastest buggy, which I thought was cool. So she was a woman of means, that she could travel on such a nice boat. For all these women writing under their own name. Yes, except for Ludemia. She went under Dima, and that's why we had a hard time finding her. And Jim Thompson, he's a good friend of mine. He helps me out a lot. If I get stuck on something, we'll collaborate. When is the book coming out? When is the book coming out? We're working on that. We need to know where these women came from and who their husbands were, because the Quaker women were allowed to do what they wanted because there was no hierarchy in the family. Okay? And they could basically speak their own mind, which I thought was very interesting.
No, but wasn't that, I love history. Wasn't that a great setup for the rest of our talks? Thank you, Nina. Okay, that was a great talk.